Hi there, let's talk about obligation. What is obligation? I often hear people say that they feel obliged towards various people. They may feel obliged towards their parents, their spouse, their children, or towards their colleagues or boss. They may feel obliged towards their community or society, or even an authority. So what is obligation? Do you have a definition? Naturally, an obligation is not a physical object. It's a construct of the mind, so people will have very different perceptions of what it is. Think about this. What's the difference between an obligation and an agreement or a contract? What's the difference between an obligation and a commitment? An agreement is entered voluntarily between two or more people. Each of those involved give their consent to the agreement. In other words, there's mutual consent between all of them. Both agreement and consent are also constructs of the mind and not physical objects, which is why people have a need for contracts. A contract is physical evidence that there was mutual consent when the agreement was made. A commitment, however, does not require other people. You can make a commitment by yourself and even to yourself. You can be committed to achieve a certain goal, to exercise to help people in need, and you can be committed to fulfill your end of an agreement with other people. So back to obligation. You may feel that you must fulfill a voluntary agreement. However, that feeling is not obligation, that's commitment. I define the feeling of obligation as the feeling that you must fulfill demands from a relation that is not voluntary. And because it's not voluntary, you're not morally bound to fulfill it. Yet you may choose to fulfill it to avoid punishment. So in reality, obligation does not exist. However, you may feel obliged to do something, and that feeling can be very real. Back to start, the relations to your spouse and your children are commitments because you chose them voluntarily. The relation to your parents was not voluntary when you were born. Once you are an adult, however, you can choose whether or not you have contact with them. If you do, it may be a commitment. The relation to your colleagues and boss is voluntary. You all gave your consent to work with each other. Are you committed to contribute to your local community? Do you let an authority define what that is? If so, it's not voluntary, and you may feel obliged to contribute and comply with the demands of authority. To sum it up, obligation is the demands from so-called authority, which you are not morally bound to fulfill, although you may feel obliged to do so. So when you go about your daily life, do you make choices because you fear the consequences, or because you are committed to those choices? Other questions related to this are, what is authority and what is society? Both are covered in other videos on this channel. I'm Jonas, and thanks for watching. What did you think of this video? Did you like it, or did it piss you off? Please share your thoughts so we can get a conversation started about this important topic. Stay tuned and subscribe for more what-isification about existing as well as new topics. Have a great day.